This is a 45-minute language learning routine that will get you fluent in any language in less than a year. It's simple and easy to follow, right? And I will explain it step by step. If you follow the plan, you'll be able to learn 10,000 words or more of vocabulary in a year, 10,000 useful sentences or more for conversation. You will be able to understand 99%, pretty much anything in the language, and you'll be able to speak fluently with confidence and pretty good pronunciation. All right, so let's go. First, let's talk about what doesn't work. If you've been trying to learn a language, you probably tried one of these things, and they all get pretty bad results for most people. Language classes are the traditional stuff with grammar and all of that, and they don't work for most people. Unless you go into an intensive course and you're doing 4 hours a day, every day for 3 months or whatever, it's not going to work. And even if you do an intensive course, the moment you get out of the course, you will start to forget everything you learned there, unless you really use the language all the time. And if you're doing classes like most people do, like once or twice a week, it's going to take years and you'll still like never learn the language this way. This happens to most people. Most people have had Spanish classes, English classes, whatever, for years, sometimes decades, and still can't speak. Right? So, not exactly a waste of time, but extremely inefficient. Next, we've got comprehensible input, really popular now, binge watching YouTube channels, drooling Spanish, whatever, all this stuff, massive waste of time. You will never speak a language fluently by watching YouTube videos. All right. Next, and related to that, so-called immersion, moving to the country, all that stuff. There's nothing in the country that will make you fluent by breathing the air there, right? So unless you're really doing the work and you're doing it deliberately, you're not going to learn. So immersion is mostly a cope. And finally, the worst of them all, apps like Duolingo. Basically, a bad video game disguised as language learning. It won't work. You will never get fluent with something like that, right? You're wasting your time. So let's stop talking about what doesn't work. Let's talk about what does work. Language learning is pretty simple. You need to focus on what you need to know to be able to actually understand and speak the language. So you don't need to study grammar. You don't need to do any of that. The only thing you need to do is learn a lot of words and sentences, useful words and sentences, stuff that you actually want to be able to understand and say. And I'll show you soon how to do that. And then you need to get a lot of listening practice that's targeted and efficient, deliberate, and a lot of deliberate speaking practice. You cannot get good at speaking if you don't do a lot of speaking. And you cannot get good at understanding the language if you don't do a lot of listening, but listening alone won't work if you don't know a lot of words, right? So learn because it will just be noise. You will not know the words. So a lot of vocabulary, a lot of listening, a lot of speaking. It doesn't have to be in this specific order. You can do it all together, and I'll show you how. So first, we need to learn a lot of words and sentences, and we need to learn them fast. And the most efficient way to do this is using a list of example sentences. Basically, you need to learn two different types of sentences. You need to learn thousands of sentences, right? And it sounds like a lot, but it's really not once you've learned the basic ones, because then it gets easier and easier because you already recognize a lot of the vocabulary there. So you have two types of sentences that you need to learn for vocabulary. Two types of vocabulary, basically. You need to learn things that you want to be able to say and things that you want to be able to understand. That would include the most common verbs, the most common adjectives, things like that. Those you need for comprehension. A lot of the vocabulary that you'll need for comprehension, you will not need it for speaking because nobody uses that kind of words, or very few people use that kind of words in normal conversation. But you need them to understand TV or videos or podcasts or things like that, because the vocabulary that people use in those formats, in those contexts, is very different from daily conversation, usually, right? But then again, you also need to learn specific sentences for specific situations, things that you want to be able to say in real life with no hesitation. That would be your language islands. These are sentences, your own sentences that you prepare for your own situations. This is quite a lot of work, and if you have limited time, maybe it's not the best idea. I highly recommend you do this, but if you don't have the time, you can always get specific sentence lists for all the common conversations, all the common situations, conversation topics. I have thousands and thousands of sentences like this that are AI generated. They know exactly what I would say, because then I've got my own list of things that I wrote myself for myself, and I translated them, I learned them. But to start speaking, these are really useful. So thousands of sentences for travel, for work, for talking about a bunch of different things, different hobbies. You learn those, and also for specific situations like ordering food, meeting people, introducing yourself, that kind of stuff. You need thousands of sentences that cover everything, right? Instead of learning vocabulary in isolation, you learn vocabulary with task based, situation based sentences or topic based sentences, and also the most common stuff, which often will not be as useful in conversation, believe it or not, because it's common in content but not in conversation. But it will still be useful to understand content. So you need to learn it anyway. You'll get lists like this, and you learn the verbs and the adjectives simply by seeing them in example sentences over and over again. Right? So this is Russian, and you get I speak German, you speak quietly, she speaks the truth, so я говорю по-немецки, ты говоришь тихо, она говорит правду, мы говорим по делу. And you learn the grammar as well by seeing the verbs, different verbs in context, right? So you learn thousands of sentences, thousands of words and thousands of sentences that include all those words, um, of situations, and also of like all the common stuff. How do we learn them? Um, this is a very useful technique that I keep insisting my students that they should use. A lot of people don't want to, because it's so new and weird. They don't want to. New for them, it's really not new. Like ancient Greeks were already using it. Romans were using it to memorize hour-long speeches and things like that. It's an extremely powerful memory technique that like people 2,000 years ago were already using. It's nothing new, really, but it's new to a lot of people, and they just feel weird about it. But I highly recommend you train this skill and you learn this skill well, because it's going to really be a game changer if you learn to use it properly. All right. So basically, I'm going to give you a few examples. I'm learning Greek right now, and these are some words that I quickly memorized. Um, if you're Greek and my pronunciation is terrible, I've been learning for 2 weeks, right? So give me a break. So basically, what you need to do is take the word, so trejo, run, and you find a word that sounds like the new word that you're trying to learn. So Danny Trejo or Danny Trejo. I don't know how Americans say it actually. Um, and I just visualized him running a marathon, which he doesn't look like the kind of guy who would run a marathon. But you need to come up with something that's like him running from the police would be more maybe, but it needs to be something that's not ordinary, not normal, right? Something shocking, something weird, so that's memorable, something stupid, something silly, cartoonish, right? So Danny Trejo running from not from the police, running a marathon. Sorry, Pino, a drink, drinking a. Well, I use Spanish for this because it's one of my native languages. But Pino is pine tree, and it's still similar enough, right? You can modify them a little bit. Still Pino pine. Visualize yourself drinking a pine tree. How can you do that? Just imagine doing that. Kratao. I keep. I hold. Have you played God of War, the video game? I used to play that when I was like a long time ago. Like PlayStation 2, I think. Yes, I'm that old. So yeah, visualize him holding hands. You're holding hands with him, which sounds kind of scary. Next, creas, meet. Do you know any Chris's? Just creas, Chris. It's not the best, but it works. Maybe Chris from Family Guy eating lots and lots of meat, or anything else that you can think of. Meat, being him being in a meat factory. Yeah, anything. You just have to make a mental image. Next, pulao. I sell. Polly from The Sopranos, and you'll notice that I use a lot of characters from films and series and things like that because they're very easy to visualize. So find something that sounds like it or someone that sounds like it, and you can also use celebrities, people you know, anything. Polly from The Sopranos is trying to sell you something, and if you've watched The Sopranos, you know that you don't want to buy anything from Polly. No, you don't want to talk to Polly at all, really. Next, Nero, water. Is it Nero? Nero. I think Nero. Nero, the Roman emperor, it was crazy. Rome burnt. They say he burnt it. I don't know. But just visualize him drinking water while Rome burns in the background. Next, somi, bread. Somi sounds like the somi, som. You can ignore the P there because it's a somi, but like som 1916, World War One, and just visualize them either throwing bread at each other from the trenches or shooting bread at each other. Something stupid like that, but that's very visualizable. Alas, salt. And originally I visualized wings because alas means wings in Spanish, and I visualized an angel with salt wings, and they just like fall apart. Or a plane, you can also visualize it with wings. But for English speakers that don't speak Spanish, Alice, Alice in Wonderland, and she gets turned into a salt statue, like someone in the Bible, which I don't remember who that was. But yeah, very easy to visualize again if you are a little bit creative. Like this is something you need to train, right? This is a skill. You can easily create 100 of these a day if you maybe not in 45 minutes, but 30 or 40 a day in 45 minutes, very doable. I'll show you then later on how and when to do it, right? This is a skill that requires some practice in the beginning, can get frustrating, but once you get decent at it, it's fun and it's extremely effective, especially if you combine it with the next exercises. So let's talk about developing fluency. You need to not just know the words, right? And this is the thing that all the input people get wrong. Yes, you need to see the words in context over and over, and we are definitely going to do that. But you also need to practice your other two skills that you need for fluency, which is you need to know the words, but you also need to remember them fast enough when you need them, and you not only words, but you need to remember entire sentences, or at least um, know well enough how those sentences work that you're able to basically your ability to retrieve that information that you've stored needs to be trained, and then also your mouth needs to be trained. You need muscle memory so that then you also can say those sentences aloud, right? There are a lot of people who understand English perfectly, non-native speakers like myself, who can also if you give them enough time, they'll be able to say something. But if you tell them to read this, they'll be like, uh, your mouth, because they haven't get enough practice, right? They haven't been practicing enough. So it's a matter of muscle memory. You also need to practice. It's two different skills: remembering, so retrieving the information that you've learned by getting exposed to it, and also then just saying it, right? Because even if you know the exact sentence you need to know, unless it's like a tongue twister. You know the words, but because it's so difficult to say, you're not able to say it in one go and the right way. Well, speaking a foreign language is like speaking in tongue twisters often, unless you've trained, right? So two different skills. Apart from learning the information, which is what you do with input, it's not enough. You need the other two steps as well, right? This is why input alone is not good. It's good for the just for the first part. You need the other two parts as well. Next, shadowing and associations. This is where things get interesting. This is where you start developing fluency and also learning a lot of vocab very fast. So what we're going to do is a lot of shadowing with all those vocabulary sentences, most common words with example sentences, the language islands, the conversation sentences for traveling, for uh, work, for talking about this and that, whatever you like to rant about, the thousands of sentences you're going to learn that you want to learn, we're going to start shadowing them. So take the audio files and we'll with it first with the text in front of us so that we know what we're talking about. We're going to listen and shadow. So listen and repeat simultaneously over and over again. And we're going to do it in two different ways. The first time that we get exposed to new materials, we're going to shadow everything 5 times. So the audio file will repeat each sentence 5 times. So it'll be the audio file will have no English, all right? It'll be just target language. So wo arbeitest du? Wo arbeitest du? Wo arbeitest du? Wo arbeitest du? 5 times. If you don't know the sentence, the meaning of it, you still repeat it aloud. And you hear it, and if you don't know it, you can look it up during the second, the third rep, but you're still saying it aloud. So wo arbeitest du? Wo arbeitest du? Saying it while looking at the English. And then you know, okay, that's what it means. And you can like, do is you and vo is where. Okay, that doesn't mean that you now perfectly know this. No, of course not. But the first time we do this, this alone will already be very effective to learn a lot of the patterns of the language and to start to learn the right pronunciation. Because if you repeat something 5 times, the third, fourth, fifth times, your pronunciation will be much better because you'll pick up small things at the first time or the first 2 times you didn't get. So you'll each time you'll sound a little bit more like the audio file. And we'll do associations, well, we try to do associations while doing this. So when you encounter new words that you don't know, you should try to create the mnemonic associations while doing the shadowing. That way you'll go fast. Because otherwise, if you get a vocabulary list and you try to create associations, you just sit in front of a list and you get really frustrated and you'll get 10 associations done in half an hour and you'll hate yourself for even trying and you'll say that it doesn't work. But instead, if you've got limited time, you just have the time that the audio file, the time that takes the audio file to repeat the sentence 5 times. That's the time you've got to create associations. It'll be very difficult, but you're also repeating them aloud and you're getting the meaning. So you're still learning while doing that, right? It's not time wasted. And yeah, you'll fail over and over. It'll be very difficult. You get very few associations done the first day, but you got a lot of reps of shadowing, listening, and repeating. So you're still learning a lot. And slowly, because you're forcing yourself to go fast, you'll get better and better at thinking of associations quickly, also while saying the words aloud. So again, this is a very intense exercise. It's hard work, and you need to be 100% focused. This is also an advantage because for people like me with ADHD, or like a lot of you actually tell me that you've got ADHD. One of the problems when learning languages, the main problem is that for a lot of people, including myself, is that we get distracted. There's like lots of tabs on your computer, and you get like YouTube and comments and social media and this and that, and email. And if you are shadowing and if you are creating trying to create associations at the same time, 100% of your focus has to be for that, right? So yeah, it will make you stay focused. It will be really helpful for that, right? So do it like that, 5 times each, and create associations when possible. Try to create them. It'll be very difficult in the beginning, but it'll get better and better. And you'll get better and better. It'll get easier and easier. And then when you're reviewing the content that you've already repeated 5 times, then we use a second audio file where the sentences are repeated only once. So you can go much faster that way, right? So it'll be, wo arbeitest du bei einem Startup in der Innenstadt? Wie bitte Marketing Automatisierung? Ich habe früher, whatever. And you can review 1,000 sentences in around 45 minutes. Doesn't mean you'll review 1,000 sentences a day because it's a 45-minute routine, and not all 45 minutes will be for this, right? But again, it's very fast, and in 15 minutes of doing this already, or half an hour of doing this, you get in a lot of reps. And my estimate usually is that, again, it depends on the language, it depends on the person as well. Okay, some people are denser than others, but if with 100,000 repetitions of actually repeating the sentences aloud, you should speak relatively, not fluently, but conversationally fluent. Like you should be able to, with confidence, without much trouble, say whatever you want to say, as long as you've been doing it with the right sentences and actually, like, you've actually said the sentences aloud. If you just listen to it or you just read, no. But 100,000 reps, which is an hour a day, no, 45 minutes a day of just doing that for 100 days. I do more of that, more than that. I'm doing like 2 or 3 hours a day of shadowing for Greek now. Extremely effective. Anyway, this is one of the exercises. Here comes the next one. Active recall. Remember when I said that you need to not only know the words and sentences, which you'll do with the previous exercise, with the shadowing, you learn the words and sentences, especially if you create associations, and you'll also develop muscle memory for your mouth. With active recall now, you'll train your ability to retrieve that information that you've learned faster and faster, so then you can say it. Just doing shadowing, lots of it, will already be very helpful to speak. But if you also train your ability to remember the sentences, then you'll get even better, right? And this is pretty simple. Basically, what you need to do is, after doing all that shadowing, you come back to the sentence list and you try to translate from English into the target language. Yeah, my parents lived in the countryside. Mis padres viven en el campo. If you make a mistake, then you repeat the sentence aloud. Try to visit them every month. Intento visitarles cada mes. Intento visitarlos cada mes. It's the same. They love when the whole family comes over. Les encanta cuando toda la familia, cuando viene toda la familia. Yeah, you get the point. You translate, and it will be very difficult to translate. You say it aloud when translating. Check if you say it correctly or not. Pay attention to detail, especially for languages like Spanish, like casi todos los días. Like if you said casi todas las días or something, and you repeat it aloud correctly this time, right? You could do this in writing as well, but it's much slower. And if you have limited time, it's better to do it in speaking. This exercise is excellent to train your ability to think in the language, to come up with things to say. And also, it's a really good way to correct the mistakes you're already making. So this plus the shadowing is a really, really good combination to learn thousands of sentences quickly and develop actual fluency, the ability to then remember those sentences and to say them fluently. All right, so let's look at the whole plan, the 45-minute routine. Basically, I'm going to give you actually two routines because it depends on what stage you are. I highly recommend you start with this, even if you are already at an intermediate level. But Once this gets redundant or easy, like shadowing 5 times, once you know the sentences, it doesn't really make much sense. So creating associations, once you know the vocab and you create and you know the sentences, doesn't make much sense to try to create associations. So we'll change to something else. All right, but first, learning the vocab, learning the phrases, and a lot of repetition. And it's very simple: 45 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. 15 minutes of shadowing the sentences 5 times each, and try to create associations while doing that, right? So you repeat the sentences, each one 5 times. And for the new vocab, you try to come up with associations. This is very difficult, and you will not come up with that many associations in the beginning. But after a few weeks of doing it, it'll get easier and easier. And then 15 more minutes of reviewing this stuff, but only one time, right? Just listen while reading and you repeat everything aloud. Simple, right? Then 15 more minutes of with the same materials. Never start with this with new materials, because it's going to be basically impossible for you to translate unless you're already at an intermediate level. It's going to be basically impossible for you to translate into the language sentences that you haven't repeated aloud before, you haven't read before, right? So first do this, then same materials, do this, then with the same materials, do this. You read the sentences in English and you try to say them in the target language and check. 15 more minutes of this. And you'll review maybe 10% of the sentences that you shadow while doing this, because this is way slower and shadowing is fast. But you need to go fast for this, because amount of reps is important. If you get thousands and thousands of reps, you'll get good at speaking eventually, sooner rather than later, right? So first, very intensive, very concentrated shadowing, 5 reps with each sentence, and then this with all the sentences, the thousands of sentences you want to learn. And then if you have the time for extra listening practice, again, this is a 45 minutes plan, but if you have the time while working out or going to work, commuting, driving, whatever, you can listen to the same audio files. This one I recommend listening to. This one will be very hard to listen to because it's just very repetitive. But that will be extra practice that you're getting, and it will be helpful. And once you get pretty good at this, you know the sentences. At least you understand the sentences without looking at the meaning, and you're able to say them, and you start getting better and better at actually saying them. Like you can say them in one go without that much hesitation. Then we move on to the next stage, which is the intermediate and then advanced level plan. And the differences here are that you won't be needing associations anymore, or the 5 times repetition. Once you get good enough at the language that you can get exposed to new content, and you understand 80 or 90% of it, of the new sentences that you reviewing from the thousands and thousands you need to learn. Once you understand 80 or 90% without looking it up, because you already know a lot of vocab, you don't need to review each one 5 times at first. And you can create associations if you want, but it's just shadowing normally will allow you to go way faster. So 15 minutes of shadowing, same thing. 15 minutes of active recall, which should be much easier now. And then 15 minutes of, 15 1-minute sessions of free flow, which basically in this case means setting a timer and trying to speak as much as possible about whatever, using all those sentences that you've learned. Just you put a 1-minute timer on your phone. But what I actually do is just take my phone and send myself a voice message so I can see how. First of all, I don't look like a maniac. I can talk to myself even outside on my phone. So I'll send voice notes to myself, and I can see when I've spoken for 45, 50 seconds, 1 minute, and then that's 1 rep. And that's 15 reps that you need of that. So active recall is really good always for fluency development. But then to use all those sentences much more naturally once you've been translating them and you can translate them pretty well, do a lot of this. Just timer and talk about whatever. And then again and again and again. If you only did this, you would improve your fluency, but you wouldn't be getting some benefits that this and this are giving you, right? This this allows you to get a lot more reps because it's super fast and also works your pronunciation, and it exposes you to new materials that you hadn't seen before if you keep doing it with more and more sentences. This gives you sentences to this makes you say sentences that you wouldn't think of normally. Like a lot of sentences, a lot of words and sentences, you learn them, you learn to understand them first, but maybe they're not part of your active vocabulary, so you don't really think of them when you're speaking. You don't remember them fast enough. This will help you with that to to activate a lot of vocab, a lot of sentence structures, and also it will help you correct mistakes, constantly getting feedback. And then this will help you use all of that more naturally. All right. So it's not just one thing or the other. Each one has its place and you should combine them. And finally, listening practice. And the extra listening practice at this point, if you easily understand the learning materials, I recommend you switch directly to authentic podcasts. Whatever you're into, I like history, I like sports, some kind of sports, like combat sports mostly. Like cultural stuff. I find podcasts on those topics in the languages that I learn and just keep listening to them so that I get exposed to native speaker content. But it's not uh, learn Spanish with whatever. No, it's not a learning podcast. It's podcast about whatever super interesting topic that you're really into in the language. It's a podcast by native speakers for native speakers. It's not a learning material, right? You should switch to that immediately. Well, directly, not immediately. Directly after basically mastering the sentence list audio files, right? And that's basically it. Any questions? Let me know. I think this was pretty clear. If you are still not able to apply all of this, check out the link in the description and you can try the 30-day challenge there. And all of these exercises, you'll see them there in detail with the materials.